Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the towering obsidian chamber of the Galactic Council, her uniform pristine, despite the chaos that had erupted across a dozen star systems in the past week. The representatives of 47 species sat in their designated alcoves, their varied forms creating a symphony of alien architecture that had once impressed her. Now, it only reminded her of how fundamentally different they all were. "The motion passes," announced Counselor Vex Thai, his crystalline voice echoing through the chamber. "Humanity will surrender all military vessels above Class C designation and submit to mandatory neural compliance monitoring." The silence that followed was deafening. Chen felt the weight of every alien gaze upon her, some curious, others openly hostile. The Zephyrian's tentacles writhed with what she had learned to recognize as satisfaction. The metal-skinned Nexari clicked their approval in sharp staccato bursts. "Counselor Vexthai," Chen said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "I need to ensure I understand correctly. You're demanding that humanity disarm our defensive fleets and allow foreign entities to monitor our thoughts?" "Correct, Admiral Chen. The recent incidents have demonstrated that human aggression remains insufficiently contained despite the Terran Accords of 23H7. Chen almost smiled. The incidents Vexthai referred to were humanity's defense of 3 colony worlds against Korthak raiders who had been mysteriously well-informed about human shipping routes and defensive positions, information that could only have come from the Council itself. "And if we refuse?" The Zephyrian ambassador, Kelthara, spoke next, her voice a melodious threat. "Then the Council will be forced to implement the containment protocol. Humanity will be restricted to your home system, with all trade and diplomatic relations severed." "Admiral," Chen nodded slowly, processing the ultimatum. Around her, the alien representatives waited with the patience of species that measured time in millennia rather than decades. They had made their calculations, weighed their options, and decided that humanity, despite being the youngest species in the Council, had grown too dangerous to remain unchecked. What they hadn't calculated was that they were dealing with humans. "I see," Chen said finally. She reached into her jacket and withdrew a small device, placing it on the speaker's podium. "Then I formally invoke Article 15 of the Terran Accords." A ripple of confusion passed through the chamber. Vexathai's crystalline form flickered with uncertainty. "Admiral, Article 15 pertains to withdrawal from the Council. Surely you don't mean—" "I mean exactly that." Chen's finger hovered over the device. "As of this moment, humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council and renounces all treaties, accords, and agreements made under Council authority." The chamber erupted. Representatives leaped to their feet, tentacles lashed, and harmonic voices rose in discord. Through it all, Chen stood calmly, waiting for the chaos to subside. "You cannot!" Kelthara's voice cut through the noise. "Your species will be isolated. You'll have no access to galactic trade routes, no protection from hostile forces, no interference," Chen interrupted. "No oversight. No demands that we surrender our sovereignty to beings who sold intelligence about our colonies to raiders." The accusation hung in the air like a plasma charge. Vexathai's form dimmed noticeably. "You have no proof of such claims," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Chen smiled then, and several species instinctively recoiled. The human smile, they had learned, often preceded something unpleasant. "Actually, we do. 3 weeks ago, my intelligence division intercepted communications between this council and Korthak clan leaders, detailed shipping manifests, defensive positions, patrol schedules, all provided by members of this esteemed body. She gestured to the assembly. You've been feeding our enemies information while demanding we reduce our ability to defend ourselves. Preposterous. The Nexari delegates. Metallic voice rang with indignation. The Council would never... The Council has been trying to eliminate humanity as a potential threat since we joined, Chen continued. The gradual restrictions on our military, the trade embargoes disguised as resource management, the steady erosion of our territorial rights. We've been watching, learning, adapting. She pressed the button on her device. Immediately, holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing detailed records of council communications, financial, transfers, and strategic planning sessions. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The question, Chen said as the representatives frantically reviewed the data, is what happens next. Vexithai recovered first, his crystalline form brightening with renewed authority. Even if these allegations have merit, humanity cannot survive alone. You need the Council's protection, our technology, your protection. Chen laughed, a sound that made several species flinch. Counselor, we've been alone before. We thrived in isolation for millennia before joining your little club. The difference is, now we know we're not actually alone in the universe. We're just alone among friends. She began walking toward the chamber's exit, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Where are you going? Kelthera demanded. Chen paused at the threshold and looked back. Home, to prepare for what comes next. You see, counselors, you made one critical error in your calculations. You assumed that humanity would choose subjugation over isolation. Her smile returned, colder now. But humans have never been very good at accepting cages. We prefer to break them. The chamber doors sealed behind her with a finality that echoed through the galaxy. Within hours, human ships began evacuating council space, carrying with them technologies and knowledge that several species had come to depend upon. Trade networks collapsed. Scientific collaborations ended overnight. Military partnerships dissolved. The Council had expected humanity to beg for mercy, to accept any terms rather than face the vast darkness alone. Instead, they watched as humanity simply walked away, carrying their fire with them into the void. And in the months that followed, as mysterious new technologies began appearing in human space, as their fleets grew stronger rather than weaker in isolation, the Council began to realize that they hadn't contained a threat. They had released one. Humanity had left the galaxy's table, but the game was far from over.